Sammy and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be doing my May wrap-up, which was also the Asian Readathon wrap-up. I had a really great reading month. I read so many books that I loved. I didn't have anything, I think, below a 3-star, which is pretty good. So let's just get right in. So the first book that I have to show you is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This was for the group read-along, which was the bonus challenge that was optional. I obviously did it. I made it a point to read this first because the group live show discussion for the book was on the 16th, so I read this one first. I loved this book so much. I recommended this to everyone before I even read it in my TBR video, I believe, because Celeste Ng's writing is just so good. This book revolves around a town called Shaker Heights, and we follow Pearl and her mother who moved to Shaker Heights. They're new, and Pearl befriends this family, and the mom, Elena, is kind of like the town, like, I don't even know how to describe it. She is the woman of the town. She knows everyone. She's very influential. She's a journalist and their family is very wealthy. But Elena is kind of wary of Pearl's mother, Mia, because Mia is a single mother. She's an artist and she just doesn't fit the status quo of Shaker Heights. And so it kind of follows that whole interaction and relationship, and the fact that Elena is kind of suspicious of Mia and starts looking into her past, and we learn more about Mia's background and Pearl's background, and I just loved this so much. I gave this book, I want to say, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. There were some things that I wish had been either developed more. I know a lot of the background characters, or like the side characters that are still main characters, weren't as rounded and developed as I would hope they would be. Yeah, otherwise this book was really good. I really recommend reading it and then going back to watch the live show with Cindy and the other hosts for this read along. So the second book I have to talk about is Library of Legends by Janie Chang. This book I ended up only giving 3 out of 5 stars, which I was really bummed out about. I wanted to like this book a lot more than I did. I gave it 3 out of 5 just because the concept was really interesting and I was very interested in where the story was going and learning about what was going to happen. But I think the story was just super underdeveloped. It's very slim for the concept that this is. If you don't know what this is about a Chinese university during World War II, and they are forced to evacuate the university and walk by foot across China for like 1,000 miles, and they're also entrusted in transporting this these sacred texts called the Library of Legends that their university is known for. So the concept is really interesting. There's also some, you know, fantasy elements involved as far as the mythical slash legendary creatures that are in the Library of Legends, that you actually see them like in reality. However, that was super underdeveloped as well. It was kind of just like thrown in there. So I feel like this book would have really benefited with more room. I think this is just not enough room for the concept that this was. I think the story itself was really interesting, but again, just really underdeveloped. The love story even was kind of like they weren't in a relationship and then they liked each other all like instantly, and I really wanted to like this book. I don't know if this is deliberate, but it kind of reads as like bardic, in a sense of like, this is what happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And it's like someone's telling you the story, which I don't know if that was deliberate. If it was, it wasn't really executed very well. The one rule of storytelling is to show, not tell. You hear that in any writing course you take, in any English course you take. And this book just didn't do that. And so the exposition was really lacking, but again, I still really enjoyed this book, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I think if it just had more room, this could have been so good. The concept was really interesting. The perspective of Asia during World War II, which I'll talk about later, is just really interesting to me because it's something that you don't hear about very often. But again, it just needed more room to really tell the story the way that it deserved to be told. The next book I read was Sputnik Sweetheart by Haruki Murakami. I'm not really sure how to feel about this book. This book revolves around a boy slash man named Kei who is in love with his best friend Sumire. And Sumire's kind of this like quirky, I don't want to say wild, but she's just this like enigmatic person, and she doesn't really go about life the way that she's supposed to according to like expectations in society. And she ends up working for this woman and falling in love with an older woman, and then they go to an island off the coast of Greece and she disappears, and it's about Kei kind of trying to help find her. There is magical realism involved in this book, and I don't know, I feel I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but I don't know how I actually, like, Murakami's writing is just so different that it's hard to really talk about, but I did get a lot from this book meaning-wise. It's a really interesting metaphor for not necessarily loss of innocence, but just the transition from young adulthood into adulthood is shown in this book really well, and I loved it so much. So in this book, there's talk of like a parallel universe and part of you like disappearing into that other universe, and to me it was really representative of the experience of kind of transitioning into adulthood and what that feels like. It feels like that innocent part of you is gone now, and you're kind of forced into this life of what's expected of you and responsibilities. Sumire is very much like the portrait of innocence, of youth. She is, again, like wild. She doesn't even have her own like landline phone. She doesn't have typical jobs that you would expect an adult to have. She isn't really like sure of herself or really good at anything, and she's kind of just like goes through life like kind of floating. And Kei is very much the opposite of that, or he's becoming the opposite of that. I would have to say that this book is very strange, which is very typical of Murakami. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I still found this book really resonant and I enjoyed it a lot and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So during my month, I actually veered away from my original TBR that I had set for myself in, I didn't even mention, side note, I didn't even mention what these books fulfilled for the challenges. So Sputnik Sweetheart was what I chose for read any book by an Asian author. And then Library of Legends was read a book by an author or with a main character who is different from you. And I chose this one because Jeannie Chang is Taiwanese. The book is set in China, which I'm not Chinese and not Taiwanese, and I've never been to China or anything like that. So it was definitely a different perspective for me. And those were the challenges that those fulfilled. And then for my original TBR, I veered away from the book that I chose for read a book by an author who you can relate to or a main character who you can relate to. I chose Dream Jungle by Jessica Hagedorn because Jessica Hagedorn is Filipino and I myself am Filipino. I picked up Dream Jungle and I read a few pages of it and I just wasn't really in the mood for it. Again, I'm very much a mood reader, and I did not want to force myself to read this book when I wasn't ready for it, because to me that's like doing the book a disservice, and I'm just not going to enjoy it as much as I would if I was like ready for it. So it happened that I bought a book that was by a Filipino author, a Filipino-American author, which works even better because that's my background. I happened to buy this not planning to read it for this challenge, but I had it and I wasn't in the mood for Dream Jungle, and I was kind of like well, I don't have anything else to read. And then I had this book. So that book is Once Upon a Sunset by Tiff Marcello. This book was such a pleasant surprise. This book is about a woman named Diana who is Filipino American. She's a quarter Filipino. Her mom was half. And she's an OBGYN in Washington, D.C. And something happens at work that forces her to take a temporary leave of absence. And at the same time, her grandmother had died and her mother, Margot, moves in with her, and they're going through the grandmother's things, and they find these letters from Margot's father, who she had never met and thought that he had died during World War II, but it turns out these letters are dated after that. So that leads Diana into this whole hunt into her family's history and background, and she uncovers some secrets about her family, and it leads her on this journey to the Philippines for the first time. And I loved this book so much. I was not expecting this book to have so much packed into it. What I found really interesting about this book is that a lot of the Filipino literature that I've read has centered around characters who were very much immersed in their Filipino culture. They were either born in the Philippines or maybe they were first generation in America who they still are very much attached to their culture. However, Margot and Diana are not at all connected with their Filipino heritage at all. Margot's half Filipino and it comes from her father's side, but she had never met her father, had never been to the Philippines, so she didn't have that connection there. And so I just really appreciated the representation of someone who is multiracial but doesn't know everything about their heritage or their culture. And you go on this journey with Diana and Margot into their heritage and their background and learning things about themselves and their identity and what it means to be multiracial and like how that affects their identity. And is it okay to be both American and Filipino? And like, do you have to choose one to identify with? And I just wasn't expecting to get all of that from this book that I thought was just going to be like a cute fluffy read, you know? So I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only reason I docked it a little was because some of the dialogue, while most of the dialogue was super authentic and felt really natural, there were a couple lines that I was just like, ugh, like that's cringy, or like cheesy, but otherwise this book was brilliant. I definitely recommend this one and will be reading more Tiff Marcello and probably recommending more Tiff Marcello to all of my readers out there. The next book I have was for the challenge Read a Book Recommended by an Asian. For that I picked up Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I actually just finished this yesterday at the time that I'm filming this video. This book was just gorgeous. I loved this book so much. It spans like 70-ish years and follows this whole family of, you know, multiple generations. It depicts both the country of Korea and Japan as these characters kind of move from Korea to Japan during the time of World War II and the Japanese colonization of Korea, which I didn't really know anything about until I read this book. I loved everything about this. It was so good. You are with these characters for several years, and so you grow really attached to them, and I just felt like I knew this family inside and out. It centers around this woman named Sunja, who we see her as when she's born and then as a teenager, and she ends up having an affair with a married man and becomes pregnant, but then she finds out that that man is married, so she ends up not marrying him and instead marries this sickly minister, and they move to Japan to seemingly start a better life, but a lot of that did not go as planned. If you don't know what Pachinko is, which I didn't at the time, it is a word, I think it's Japanese, I'm not sure, but it is pretty much pinball is what it is. Pachinko or pinball plays a huge role as far as work in Japan for a lot of Koreans who emigrated there. It was like very much analogous to this family's experience, or even just life in general, of like kind of bouncing around between like what you can control and what happens to you in life, and kind of like bouncing around like a pinball would. And it was just so well done. I've heard a lot of comments about this or critiques about this, that because you do jump in time a lot, like you'll end a chapter and it'll end abruptly. It'll end with like a one-sentence summary of something like major happening, like death, and that's all you get, and then you jump like 2 years. And a lot of people didn't like that, but to me it was very realistic. I don't know, like, and very much kind of ties into that whole like pachinko pinball metaphor of like, yeah, this thing happens to you and you have to like, and it like leads you to another point in your life, and then it leads you, you know, you're like bouncing around. I don't know if I'm making sense, but to me it made sense, and it was well done. And it allowed you to see these characters kind of go through life throughout decades without being, I mean, it's already kind of chunky, but without being like 1,200 pages long of like trying to span 70 years and account for like every single year. It's just not realistic. So from like a writing perspective, it made sense, but also from a narrative perspective, it was like, it made sense to me. I don't know. It didn't bother me at all, and I felt like it actually added to the meaning and what Min Jin Lee was trying to say about pachinko and life in general. I have nothing but great things to say about this book. I'm really glad that I finally read it, because I've actually owned this book for over a year, and I finally read it, and I love it. 5 out of 5 from me. Those are all the books that I read for the Asian Readathon. Right now it is only the 25th, so I still have a few more days left of May. So what I decided to do, I actually watched a vlog from Books with Chloe where she had people comment or tweet her like random numbers. She like went to the book in her shelf and picked up whatever book came up. And for her, that book was Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. And she read this book and loved it so much and cried, and it just made me really want to read it. So I actually ended up buying it, not really planning to read it for the Asian Readathon, but because I finished Pachinko and I still have some days left, I figured I could pick this one up as like a bonus. So this book, I'll just read the back because I don't really know that much about it. It says, Kiko Hamura has always had a hard time saying exactly what she's thinking. With a mother who makes her feel unremarkable and a half-Japanese heritage she doesn't quite understand, Kiko prefers to keep her head down, certain that once she makes it into her dream art school, Prism, her real life will begin. But then Kiko doesn't get into Prism. At the same time, her abusive uncle moves back in with her family. So when she receives an invitation from her childhood friend to leave her small town and tour art schools on the West Coast, Kiko jumps at the opportunity in spite of the anxieties and fears that attempt to hold her back. And now that she is finally free to be her own person, outside the constricting walls of her home life, Kiko learns life-changing truths about herself, her past, and how to be brave. So it sounds amazing. It sounds really good. So that's what I'm reading right now. I just started it this morning, but I anticipate that I'll be able to finish this without a problem before May ends. With that, those are the books that I read for the month of May and for the Asian Readathon. I had so much fun participating in this readathon. I've actually never done a readathon. I usually will say that I'll do one and then I start it, but then I don't really stick to it. And I was so proud of myself and excited that I finally stuck to a readathon TBR and completed all of the challenges and then some. I will be definitely looking out for more readathons in the future. If you want to find me in any other places on social media, I actually just created a book Twitter account. So if you want to find me there, you can. My handle is the same pretty much everywhere. It's Books and Messy Buns. I'll have the links down below and my links to my Goodreads and my Instagram, so you can go find me everywhere else on the internet. So yeah, let me know what you read for the month of May. If you participated in the Asian Readathon, I'd love to hear how your month went and if you were able to complete all of the challenges and what books you read for those challenges. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.